Now that you've identified your critical path, you want to concentrate on shortening it. Shortening the critical path is often your primary goal as a project manager, since reducing the duration of the project typically reduces its cost. Now you can do that in a couple of ways. You can reduce the duration of critical tasks themselves, or you can overlap critical tasks to affect the overall end date of your project. Typically, you do a little bit of both. We'll explore how we can see how project will allow us to make the determinations of what the best approach is when working with our tasks. I've reopened the Project Critical Path exercise file, and I'm going to quickly re-identify for us using the wizard my critical path, so it's visually standing out for us. So I go up to Format, I select the Gantt chart wizard, I select critical path as the information I want to display, and I'm just going to pop right to finish because that's all I want to do, and I'm going to click Format it. Once I click Exit the wizard, I come back to my combination task entry view, and I see my critical path outlined in red. I also want to sub this even further and filter it by going up to my filter option in my toolbar, selecting critical from my list, and now all I'm going to be presented with are my critical tasks. So I'm really nailing down the information that I need to work with. Because this project that I'm working with is fairly linear, one task opens from the next, most of my initial tasks are going to be part of my critical path. Under normal circumstances, it will really pare down the information for you so that you can really get into the critical things that you need to be focusing on. Now, if I want to reduce the duration of my critical task, the first thing I want to take a look at are the options that I may have here. So I'm going to click Next down here in my bottom half of my screen, which is my task form area. And as I click down through here, it's going to move my information and highlight the different tasks that I'm looking at. So here I'm now starting into the guts of my project. I'm going to the very first task, identifying the target audience. Now I see it's going to be 1 day, it's effort driven. Do I have any leeway here? No leeway, no lag time. I'm going to move on to the next one. Clicking the next button, I now come down to my next task, defining the purpose of the site. Here's where I can make some changes. I can put in I've got a lag going on here of 2 days, so I can start playing around with the timing in my overall project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top here, and I'm just going to move this out ever so slightly so I can see the duration of my whole project right here to see how I'm going to be affecting my end dates. If I come down back to the bottom of my screen where I see my lag, select that cell and decrease my lag by 1 day, clicking OK. Let's see how it affected my project. Well, if I come back up here to the top half of my screen, I've decreased my project by 1 day because I've cut down on my lag time. So I've shortened up my critical path, and I've saved myself 1 day and the cost associated with that 1 day. The nice thing that you can notice here about Project 2007 is it highlights for me the cells that I have affected with the change that I made in my overall project plan. If I feel that I need to even adjust that further, I can decrease my lag time more, click OK to pull in that change, and see that the duration of my overall project plan has shrunk. So this is a nice way to be able to shorten up your project plan and tighten up your timeframes and reduce your costs. Now, adding resources to a critical task, if the task is a fixed work task or an effort-driven task, is another way that you can get work done. So if I move down to my next task, where I have a lag of 4 days, I could really play with that. But in this case, I'm going to add another person to that particular task. I go over to my resource name section, select the row below my project manager, pull in another resource, and in this case, I'm going to pick the marketing manager just for the sake of argument, and add them in by hitting my Enter key or clicking on OK. And I'm assigning that particular person to work 100% of the time to get this job done. Now, you'll notice that that has decreased my duration as well. So again, another way that I can work with it is to add more people to that task. Many hands make light work, and that's the premise that we're working with there. I could also add overtime to work to a particular individual. So if I didn't want to add a whole other individual to my task, I could just double-click on the resource and make adjustments to their working time or their costs in order to decrease the duration of that particular task. We'll talk a little bit more about that technique when we go into resourcing issues in one of the later movies. So this is one way that you can work with your critical tasks. Another way is to overlap critical tasks to affect the project end date by adjusting the dependencies. And I can do that by finding my predecessors column up here in my Gantt chart and working with the dependencies that I have placed in the tasks. Now you'll notice here in task number 5 that I have changed this to a finish to start with a lag of 4 days. I could change the type of task that I have to start, so I have them both starting on the same day, which will shorten up my time frames even more so that I've got things working simultaneously. So by adjusting the type column here in my task type, I'm adjusting the dependency so that I can have more tasks working simultaneously. Now, keeping in mind as you make these different changes, you're also going to want to reflect how that's going to be affecting your resources so that you're not over-allocating certain resources and expecting people to work 24-hour days. That's not going to be very productive. So you can see there are various ways that you can adjust the critical path within your project so that you get it working as quickly as possible with the resources that you have. We'll take a look later on in subject movies on how to address resourcing conflicts. But before we do that, I'd like to take a quick look at how we can look at multiple critical paths within a project, especially ones that are quite large. That'll be taken in our next movie.